Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. We're not bringing you our usual war coverage in today's Jerusalem Dateline. We'll get back to doing that in the new year. But we do want to present our special program on the CBN documentary, The Oracles of God. We hope you enjoy it. Coming up on this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline, it's the story of how the Old Testament was created and preserved. CBN Films' Oracles of God travel through more than 2,000 years of history and unlock the keys to a biblical treasure hunt. See ancient ashes come to life. Find new answers to the mystery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. All this and more on this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl. The Bible is the best-selling book of all time, but how did it come to be? CBN Films' documentary, Oracles of God, the story of the Old Testament, explores how the Bible was created, and it's streaming worldwide right now. Today, we're giving you a special look at the documentary. We begin with the discovery of a 2,000-year-old treasure map that describes more than $3 billion worth of hidden gold and silver. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell takes us to the place where the ancient treasure hunt began, the caves of Qumran.
In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd wandered the hills of Qumran in search of a missing goat. He threw a stone into a cave, hoping to drive the lost animal outside. Instead, the sound of shattered pottery drew the shepherd inside the cave, where he stumbled on the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the years that followed, archaeologists found 11 caves and more than 800 documents at Qumran, but one scroll was different than all the rest. The copper scroll describes a cache of gold and silver vessels buried in more than 60 locations throughout Israel. The monetary value is close to $3 billion today, but the historical value is priceless. The only place in ancient Israel with that much wealth was the Jewish temple.
It refers to the garments of the high priest. The amount of treasure that is buried is massive.
This is a tremendous witness to history. To actually have a list of the treasures from the temple itself from the first century is just amazing. Well, we have nothing better than the copper scroll now for telling us what was really there.
Even the scroll's language is mysterious. Most experts date the copper to between 25 and 75 AD, but the author wrote in a rabbinic style of Hebrew that doesn't match the rest of the Dead Sea Scrolls and wasn't widely used in the first century. Adding to the puzzle is a series of random Greek letters.
The copper scroll had to have been written just immediately before the destruction of the temple. So it actually fits the glove perfectly for the zealots, who were the priestly group who were holding down the temple, keeping the temple from the Romans in the best way possible. But before they were massacred, they left things behind in caves here near Qumran.
Some of the hiding places listed in the scroll are easy to find on a modern map, like Jericho, the Valley of Achor, and Mount Gerizim. Others are more cryptic, like Solomon's Canal, which contains a stash of silver coins, a well in Milham, where garments for the high priest were hidden, or Mattia's courtyard, where more than 600 gold and silver temple vessels were buried.
The instructions on the scrolls is like a kid's treasure map in a way. They're talking about caves, they're talking about tombs, they're talking about aqueducts and pools and other things that were known to them at the time, probably with aliases of names applied to these places so that only those people who were part of the inner circle would know where to go, how many steps to go away, and where to dig and find the temple treasure that was buried in that spot.
So what happened to the treasure? Fawn argues that anyone looking for it today is about 2,000 years too late.
In my mind, most, if not all of these, were actually found by the Romans under the point of the sword. What we do know from the Ark of Titus in Rome, it shows a clear depiction of the main items of furniture and the trumpets that were used in the temple being carried in parade through the gates of Rome to the Forum. And we do know that Titus used the booty to build the Colosseum in Rome. If there's any treasure left, there would have been small parts that might not have been found that still lie out there ready for people to find today. We don't know.
The scroll's last line hints at an even greater treasure, still undiscovered.
What's interesting is that there were actually 2 treasure maps that were made.
Here's line 64 of the scroll. In a dry well at Kulit, a copy of this document with its explanation and an inventory of each and everything. The location of Kulit is unknown, and today it's become a modern-day El Dorado for archaeologists and treasure hunters. The directions on the scroll may be a mystery, but the purpose of its writers is clear.
They're writing for the future, hoping that people will still have some continuity. They will eventually be able to find this copper scroll and reconstitute life in Judea with the temple at its focus. It's a document of hope.
Up next, ashes come back to life. Dive into the fascinating discovery and restoration of the En-Gedi scroll.
Blessed are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from all of the nations and given us his Torah.
Audiences are raving about oracles of God.
I believe this is an extraordinarily well-researched movie that indeed speaks about the integrity of God's word. It's a real faith builder.
It encouraged me to realize God's hand in preserving his word throughout history.
If God is not faithful to his word, he is not faithful. But this shows that he is.
What is it? I don't know. I thought you could tell me whether or not they're genuine.
I would describe this movie as inspiring,
captivating, excitement.
It mattered to them to get it right.
Everybody should watch this movie.
Oracles of God, the story of the Old Testament. Available now for a gift of any dollar amount. Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today. A new wave of anti-Semitism is sweeping the globe, and the Jewish state faces hostility at every turn. Now is the time for Christians to support Israel. In CBN's free booklet, Why Christians Stand with Israel, you'll discover why Christians support the Jewish state and why we must stand together with the Jewish people. Get your free copy today. Call now or go to cbn.com/standwithisrael.
In 1965, the installation of a water pipeline led to the discovery of a 1,700-year-old synagogue in an Israeli nature reserve. There, excavators found a scroll burnt beyond recognition. At least that's what they thought. Here's Chris Mitchell with the rest of the story.
Near the shores of the Dead Sea is the desert oasis of En-Gedi. In the Bible, it's the hiding place of David and a place of inspiration for Solomon. To the north is Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. And to the south, the ruins of Herod's fortress at Masada. Today, En-Gedi is a nature reserve, one of Israel's most beautiful national parks, and the site of an extraordinary archaeological discovery. The ancient settlement of En-Gedi was destroyed by a fire in the 7th century. After the fire, the settlement was abandoned until 1970, when the ruins of the community synagogue were excavated.
They found within the synagogue the holy place, the bama, with the Bible, and they found it all in ashes. And in the ashes, they found a hoard of coins, they found a menorah, and they found a massive amount of ashes that already then they suspected were a scroll. But it was ashes.
Forensics experts tried to decipher the rolled-up scroll, which looked like a cigar. But in 1970, the technology was limited. So eventually the scroll was stored at the Israel Museum. Fast forward to 2015, when archaeologist Sefi Porat retrieved the burned scroll and took it to a team of conservators who work with the Dead Sea Scrolls.
One day he walks in here with this, it was still the top of one of the boxes with all these ashes and says, "Can you please image this?" And I said, "Sefi, you must be joking. This is ashes." He says, "Yes, but they said you have such a system." I said, "Yeah, it's not miracles though. I mean, it's not as if the ashes can come back to life." Eventually it turned out that they could. Nobody, by the way, touches the scrolls. I don't touch them either. It's only these 4 or 5 conservators. And we did a CT scan, a tomography of all of these. And already then, it seemed as if that piece of charcoal was the most promising.
The Israeli team sent 3D scans of the scroll to the University of Kentucky, where Professor Brent Seals used digital imaging to virtually unwrap the scroll and reveal part of the text. After 45 years, the puzzle was finally solved.
He actually looked and saw that within these layers, he could decipher, he could pull out a layer that eventually turned out to be the first chapter of the book of Leviticus. And you can see it, you can read it. How do we know? Because we can read it now. It was amazing. To me, everything is kind of symbolic. And I remember the day that we realized that this is, the book of Leviticus, it was like, we looked at the computer and we said, unbelievable. And I wrote to Brent Seals, "You won't believe what you've deciphered, what you've uncovered."
The En-Gedi scroll is the second oldest biblical scroll to be discovered, and the oldest ever to be found inside a synagogue.
This scroll was carbon dated, remember, to the 3rd, 4th century. Why did this work? Because the ink that the En-Gedi scroll was written with probably has iron in it. We realized that the En-Gedi scroll is different because it has ink and therefore it is legible with this virtual 3D. It can identify the iron that is in this ink. Look how symbolic that the first chapter of the book of Leviticus talks about the sacrifices of the temple, okay? And here we are, and what happens to the sacrifices? They turn into ashes. And here we are bringing alive these ashes. And this was right before Tisha B'Av, which is the day of the destruction of the temple. So everything was very, very symbolic. We were really, in awe. It was like, we're bringing back to life these ashes.
Coming up, a chance meeting between a scientist and a Bible scholar leads to a discovery from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Now, for a limited time, you can get 5 of CBN's critically acclaimed documentaries. Experience the rebirth of the modern state of Israel.
The historic bonds between the Jewish people and the land of Israel cannot be broken.
Relive the battle for Jerusalem in the Six-Day War.
Jerusalem is yours, forever.
Discover how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
When people need us, we volunteer and we come and help.
Explore the world of Israeli technological innovation.
We're people of dreams. God gives us dreams. And that's really the roots, I think, of much of our innovation.
And understand the biggest land dispute in history.
Many Palestinian Arabs claim that the Jews stole Arab land. But is that the real story?
This exclusive Israel DVD collection can be yours for a gift of $29.99 or more. Call now or go online to get your Israel DVD bundle, which includes streaming access.
Spend this Christmas with family, the CBN family, right in your own home.
We're celebrating the holidays.
Enjoy the scenes and sounds of the season from around the world.
Each other now embrace.
To the kitchen.
Merry Christmas.
We're making holiday memories with the warmth and love of Christmas.
I hope you're getting in the holiday spirit.
It's a CBN family Christmas from our family to yours. Get the app or visit cbnfamily.com.
Today, most scholars agree that the Dead Sea Scrolls were copied more than 2,000 years ago by an ancient Jewish sect. They were hidden in the caves of Qumran and discovered in 1947. But new DNA tests on the scrolls suggest that not all of them came from Qumran.
More than 70 years after their discovery, fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls are still being counted, studied, and translated. A monumental task, considering that there are tens of thousands of fragments from nearly 1,000 different documents. A handwriting analysis of the Dead Sea Scrolls reveals that they were copied by as many as 500 different scribes.
There were thousands and thousands of scrolls placed in these caves. We only have a tiny, tiny fragment of the total number of scrolls that were originally put in the caves close to the site of Qumran. And that makes it hard to imagine that all of them came from a tiny little site in Qumran.
That idea has now been confirmed by a series of DNA tests performed on some of the 2,000-year-old fragments. It all started in 2012, when a molecular biologist and a biblical scholar met on a bus.
And each of us told the other what we're doing in terms of our research, and we thought it might be very cool to cooperate and to see what we can obtain.
Professors Noham Mizrahi and Oded Ruhavi decided to test the DNA on some of the scroll fragments. But first they had to convince the organization in charge of the scrolls, the Israel Antiquities Authority.
Before we can even sample the scrolls, we had to demonstrate that it's possible to get enough material. So the people at the Israel Antiquities Authorities, they just gave us at the beginning duct tape that was removed from different scrolls. And we analyzed the DNA from the duct tape. Now, only later when we showed that this is even possible and we can get enough information without destroying these precious materials, we can move on to the more important and real materials and samples.
Even with the small samples, the results were astonishing.
Imagine we are only sequencing scroll dust, 2,000-year-old, that was, the skin was processed to make the parchment. And later it was preserved in caves for 2,000 years. Still, despite all the contaminations of the different people that touched the scrolls, we were able to find enough animal DNA to say something about the scrolls, which is remarkable in my opinion.
Almost all of the samples tested were made of sheepskin, except 2 from the book of Jeremiah, which yielded some of the study's most intriguing results.
We actually sampled fragments that represent 4 different copies of Jeremiah. This particular prophetic book has one of the most complicated textual histories among all the prophetic books of the Hebrew Bible.
The 4 Jeremiah scrolls represent 3 different versions of the book. A longer version, based on the Masoretic text that's in most modern Bible translations today. A shorter version, based on the Greek Septuagint. And a third version of the book that was somewhere in the middle.
Which means that the people there in Qumran held at the same time different versions of the book. And unlike today, where we have the exact same version, all of us, they were open to different versions and to different interpretations.
But what surprised the team most was not the text, but what it was written on.
Originally, these different pieces were thought to come from the same scroll. However, we were very much surprised to find that 2 of the scrolls pieces were written on sheepskin, while 2 were written on cow hide.
Since cows need grass and water, they could not have survived in the desert near Qumran, which means that at least 2 of the copies of Jeremiah came from somewhere else.
We can't say for sure that a particular scroll was written in Qumran, but we can say with a fair amount of confidence that some pieces, samples, came from outside of Qumran. And we learned that the texts that were common in Qumran were also popular outside of Qumran.
It takes a lot of time, lots of effort to write a scroll. And they suggested that perhaps originally the scrolls came from the library of the temple in Jerusalem, and before the Roman conquest or the Jewish revolt, they were moved to be hiding here in the caves.
So I think that we solved some mysteries, we uncovered some new mysteries, and most importantly, we discovered that we still have much to learn and new mysteries to uncover. We have a few other mysteries that we would like to solve. We have a long wish list, and we will see how much of that wish list we will manage to obtain in the years to come.
Still ahead, hear from the creator of Oracles of God when we come back.
I often marvel when Pat tells the stories of the early beginnings. I think, I don't think I would have had the chutzpah to do some of those things that he did.
When you're walking by faith, it isn't necessarily easy.
Watch The CBN Story, now available on the CBN Family app.
We were right on the cutting edge of things that nobody had seen before, and I know a lot of people thought we were crazy.
The CBN Story recalls the celebrated history of the Christian Broadcasting Network from its humble beginnings.
It was quite a scene, and we walked into this television station. In the control room, there was glass all over the floor.
To the renowned ministry that continues to bring the gospel to every nation.
When people can hear the gospel on television in their own language, they respond to that.
A special presentation in celebration of Pat Robertson's life and legacy. The CBN Story. Watch now on the CBN Family app.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning, the CBN News Quick Start Podcast. Each weekday morning at 7 a.m., get quick highlights of the day's important news. Then an in-depth analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Insights that matter to people of faith. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Find the CBN News Quick Start Podcast on iTunes or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, because truth matters.
Gordon Robertson interviewed the writer and director behind Oracles of God, Aaron Zimmerman. Let's watch.
Well, joining us now is the writer, director, and creator of this wonderful film, Oracles of God, our four-time Emmy nominee, Aaron Zimmerman. And Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, start us off. The movie begins and ends with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you actually shot in the caves where they were discovered. How did you do that?
Well, not in the caves. We shot around them.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about shooting in 2021 was there were no tourists allowed in Israel anywhere, which is, I think, hasn't happened since the Middle Ages, since the Black Death. So we had, the whole land of Israel was our studio, basically. We got access that we never would have gotten. The National Park Service and the park at Qumran, they just gave us free rein. They let us fill one of their 2,000-year-old mikvot, the Jewish ritual baths, with water and put our actors in it. And we did all the exteriors in and around the caves. We scouted caves all over Israel, and we really wanted to shoot in a real one. There were ones with not a lot of ventilation, and then we learned about the bat problem. So we didn't want to deal with that.
Isn't there a bug problem, too?
Yeah, then the final straw was the flesh-eating mites that apparently lie dormant in these caves and come alive when something living comes into the caves. And that's a problem we didn't need. So my line producer said, come on, I'll build you a cave in the studio. And I said, I don't know, I don't want it to look fake. And she said, trust me, her team had done one for an FX show called Dig. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
I'd never seen it, but she said they were amazing, they can do this. And so that was our solution, and it worked. We really wanted to pound in the idea of what these Jewish scribes gave to stay and copy these scrolls and to hide them in the caves. They knew the Romans were coming. They could have left, and they didn't. They put as many of these scrolls and hid them in the caves as they could, and they stayed till the last minute, and they were slaughtered. And Josephus has a really great line that I loved about them. They cheerfully gave up their souls, knowing that they would get them back again, which is, I think, a profound statement for Judaism. They don't have the same concept of heaven as we do, so I thought that was an amazing statement.
One of the things that struck me about the shoot at Qumran was just the absolute level of accuracy as they're writing the Bible, and the effort that a scribe would go through. And just tell us about that. Well, what did they mean by focus?
Well, this is very interesting because we talked to a scribe that's alive today, and I used to do a little bit of calligraphy every now and then, and I would always tell the people, if I'm doing a calligraphy job, get me 20 extra envelopes because I will mess up. And so I said to this calligrapher and to the scribe, how do you not mess up? Because they couldn't have more than 3 mistakes on any scroll, and you had to be able to fix those mistakes, and if you couldn't, you had to bury the scroll and start over. I said, how did you do it? And he said, for me, when I'm sitting here writing this, and say I'm writing the letter Aleph, which is the Hebrew word for sort of an A, he said, that is the only thing on my mind. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do later. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to eat, who I'm going to see. I am thinking about an Aleph, and that is my purpose in life right now, is to write that Aleph. And I believe he's taking that from history, from these same scribes for thousands of years, had that kind of focus. And the name of God was very sacred to them. Now, for us, we'll say it's sacred to us too, but, you know, in an emergency, sometimes we'll let fly, oh my, you know, whatever. These people took the name of God so seriously that when they were writing, they left spaces for his name, blank spaces. And then when it was time to write his name, the scribe would go out, wash in the mikvot, completely immerse himself in water, come back up, put on a new garment, get a new pen, and he would have to stand in front of his scroll and he would say, announce to the room, I'm now writing the name of God. And then he would have to say every character as he's writing it, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. They couldn't say it, but they could spell it. And that is the great care and excellence with which they treated the name of God.
And that's the great care and excellence that you've brought to the movie. And then the thing that just is so impressive is just how cinematic it looks. How did you bring that to the screen?
I hired really good people to bring that to the screen. This is the same team that shot and produced In Our Hands. And I have been working with them. That was our first production with them. I've been working with them for 7 years now, and we've traveled everywhere, to Jordan, to Egypt, you know, so we have a really great synergy. I cannot take credit for any of that. I have great lighting, camera, special effects. They're all the top of their game.
To stream Oracles of God right now, go to cbn.com/Oracles of God. That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the God who watches over Israel and you and me neither slumbers nor sleeps. I'm Julie Stahl. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.